Well, why don't we get started here? So we're at 2 minutes after. Again, as I said, to start with, anybody who has questions, put your questions in the comments of the event, and we are monitoring them. We'll pick them up from there. But welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Boring AI Show. We are talking today about AI in healthcare, and we have joining us today our special guest, Lisa Weber, who is an AI consultant. Thank you very much in healthcare, specializing in healthcare. Thank you very much, Lisa, for joining us today.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Tim and Mind Over Machines for having me on your segment today. I love what you guys are doing, and it's been really fun listening to your show.
Awesome. Thank you. As always, we have Tally O'Miller with us, product manager at Mind Over Machines, to talk all things AI. Tally?
Hey guys, yeah, I'm excited to jump into the topic of healthcare today. That is not my background at all, but I am excited to learn how we can apply some of the AI lessons to healthcare specifically.
Awesome. All right. So as those who've been with us for the past couple episodes, we kind of have a format. We kick off with the news. Then we're going to be talking with Lisa about various topics. And today, what we're going to really be hitting on is, the challenges in medical practice healthcare. So we're really going to be talking about doctors today and nurses and care providers, hospital systems. From there, we're going to talk about some of the use cases of AI for those medical practices. So we're going to start with challenges, move into some of the applications, and then we'll be talking about, open conversation just flowing. We've got some pretty interesting, not so boring topics with healthcare, but some boring topics as well of how healthcare would be transformed with AI. And then finally, we end up with our wins, which is our positivity to go off into your Friday morning today, as it is. So depending on where you're listening from. With that said, Tally, what do we got in the news today?
Yeah, so the news article that I picked today was from The Verge, came out yesterday, and it was talking about how, or the title is, you can now use the DALL 3 AI image generator inside Bing Chat. So for those of you who don't know, Microsoft Bing has a chatbot feature that's free to use. It's similar to ChatGPT, and this currently includes Chat Enterprise, which is an AI-powered chat with commercial protection. So it's great for businesses to use, obviously in a responsible and ethical way, as we've been talking about. But it's a really cool feature that I recommend folks experiment with. But this article really focuses on its latest feature. So earlier this week, Microsoft rolled out an image generation feature leveraging DALL 3, which is OpenAI's image generation tool. So right now, this is only available on Microsoft Chat. This is not available through ChatGPT, which is interesting. And like I said, the chatbot or Microsoft Chat is great for obviously text generation, any sort of generating material for research purposes or marketing content or written content. But now it has this capability for image generation to generate visual content, which is super exciting. Tim, I know you were experimenting with this earlier this week, so I'd love to hear your experience with this and what you thought.
Yeah, so I'm really fascinated by the fact that OpenAI has put this out in Bing Chat first. I thought that was very interesting to just kind of a turn of events of most companies put their newest products in their products first. So thought that was interesting. And beyond that, for me, the big interesting part of this news with DALL 3 is the safety procedures and safety things that they've built into the system so that you can't create a picture of the Pope wearing the puffy jacket, eating having a coffee or whatever. You really are supposed to have these limitations on identity and be able to represent famous and celebrity people. So I think this is a really interesting kind of turn, both in it was released in Bing first, and also that they have integrated these new protection protocols into the image generation system. I mean, Lisa, what are your thoughts on Bing Enterprise and DALL 3?
Well, to be honest, I'm, I know of them. I have not dabbled in them. I do use Chat GPT quite a bit. That's probably the extent of where I go, and it provides me with basically everything I need. I have heard of DALL-E. I've seen people using it in the fashion that you just mentioned. Making a picture of the last summer with like politicians. So that is really getting out there. But that's really where I'm at today.
Yeah.
Still in the Chat GPT space.
Yeah. Well, and the Enterprise, Bing Enterprise, that was released a while back, but not too long. But I remember when it first came out, kind of peeking into it and saying, what do we got here? And pretty interesting stuff. And I know, our newest intern team member, Nick, who's on the meeting here. Hi, Nick. Welcome. He's been using this to play around with some image generation on, like show headers and backgrounds for newsletter images and, things like that. So it's really interesting to kind of think about the use cases, for the enterprise, but also weighing the very different paradigm that DALL-E has implemented of, well, we got these images and, OpenAI is in legal trouble with various groups who are saying, yeah, you stole our content. And, they're like, well, we scraped it from the internet and, we did our due diligence. And so whereas Adobe is like, no, we've explicitly gotten permission to do this. So I'm really looking forward to more discussions around the ethical sourcing of AI data, and what does that even mean, and how does that manifest in the Adobe, Microsoft, OpenAI image generation battle to come? So, I don't know, Tally, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it is interesting, especially as we think of like text to image, which I believe is the case here. So you're using text to say, create a picture of a dog swimming in Skittles or something. And so it's going to pull different pictures to combine. I know my sister, she has used this recently. Her cat just turned 15, so she's doing a quinceañera for her cat, but she used image to image generation. So she uploaded an image of her cat. So it was using that existing image, which was hers, but then combined it with pictures of quinceañera dresses to create this card. So I think it depends on how you're using it, but I do think it is important to think about, especially as we think about photographers and artists, what kind of art and visual materials are we using to create these images and making sure we are doing it in an ethical way. So, I think it's a fair point. And I think as it progresses and these features continue to be released, as we're seeing in the news, I think, regulation will slowly start to catch up with that. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. And I'm definitely thinking we need to be seeing these pictures of the quinceañera 15-year-old cat.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that cat pictures, that's a thing, man. We got to have that. So that's what, although we got to be careful, that'll transition us out of the boring AI show and become the cat AI show.
Exactly.
Which it's a fine line.
Fine line. Awesome. Well, man, I'm stuck on the 15-year-old cat. That's like, it's an old cat. So
yeah.
So interesting. All right. Well, let's on the topic of aging and 50 years young, let's transition into talking about some healthcare topics. So, Lisa's joining us today, and long history in healthcare and AI and automation in healthcare. And so, Lisa, we're really excited to talk about some of the challenges that are facing healthcare. And a lot of times people look at AI as, well, what can I do with AI? And, we always recommend you flip that. Like, what's your problem? And then let's figure out if AI is a right tool to solve that problem. So let's start with problems. What kind of problems and challenges are facing, the provider, medical provider healthcare industry today?
Sure, Tim. So I will tell you that, our clinicians and providers of today are truly facing the same issues as they were 15 to 20 years ago. And the issues are continuing to grow, become more pervasive. So these issues are getting worse with time and new technologies and not really better. Now, what we're talking about is, with the advent of the electronic medical records, so the EMRs and EHRs, when they came on the scene, our physicians have struggled and been burdened by, the inordinate amount of time EMRs take from the patients, the continually increasing amount of clinical data being generated. So, new products or finding new ways to generate data, ChatGPT, the explosion of all this technology is just creating a tremendous amount of clinical data points. And the lack of interoperability between all these systems that house this data, to easily talk to and complement each other it continues to become less and less. So we want them to be interoperable. And again, they're less and less. So those are really, again, same problems as 15 to 20 years ago, but they continue to be exacerbated by all the data that's coming out. Physicians being overloaded. We've got less physicians, less staffing, and we've got a lot of clinical burnout and information overload, truly.
Right. Whenever I hear information overload, it reminds me of a quote that I heard many, many years ago it was a little bit of a, controversial thing to say at the time, but the quote was that there is no such thing as information overload, just bad user experience. And, it's kind of like, oh, interesting. And I agree with you. In this case, it's like, yes, here is this system, and put your notes in here and put your notes in there. And, I think we've all been to the doctor where you're working with the doctor, you're telling the doctor, but the doctor's just typing away, like staring at their screen, type, because they have to. They're capturing everything you're saying and putting it into the system. And you get done the visit and you're like, okay, well, awesome.
Nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you. You're like, so, these problems have been around for 15 years. When EMRs, were first introduced. And so for those who don't know, my background is working in the payer side of healthcare, specifically in the global group. I see Deneen on here, who worked with for many years. So in that world. And so, there's a level of some of this I get, you have to enter the data, you have to capture the information, it has to populate around. But, with EMRs and automation specifically, has this really is it now we're capturing so much more data, or is it now it's structured and arduous to capture that data? I'm not trying to be down on EMRs. I'm just curious as we're kind of talking about, is it always been a problem? I know for 15 years you were saying it's been growing, but is it always this was the problem, or is it now because you need to type in this information in structured manner that's made it even worse, which kind of we're talking about. But
right.
I'll stop my rambling.
No. So one of the statistics I know just from working is, these clinicians do spend about 62% of their time reviewing the clinical data that's in the EHRs to, create a treatment plan that's tailored to you personally. So, what's happening is there's more and more technologies or point solutions, as they call them, that's gathering data, and these point solutions don't talk to each other. Mm-hmm. So these clinicians are having to take a step back and really filter through all the noise and all this data and, come up with, how am I going to treat this patient? What's the most efficient way? And if we can somehow, incorporate these AI-based technologies within the EHR, then the huge amount of clinical data that's available can be obtained in real time from medical devices and records. And the vast amount of data can then be quickly and efficiently analyzed and used in an optimal way. So I think that's where we want to go, is to embed these AI tools into the EMRs as a sort of a workflow tool as well. So here's all the data. Here's what we're thinking is the treatment plan. Clinician's always going to validate it. And then move forward on, now how do we treat the patient? What's the best way to do this? So I think also, these AI tools can really, since they can tackle, tedious, mundane tasks because they don't suffer from fatigue, distractions, or moods like humans. These means they can be useful for, decreasing human-related errors. Mm-hmm. So, and again, if you remove all these tedious, mundane tasks, you're getting less physician burnout, which is, one of the challenges that we're having in the U.S. today.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I love that example for how to address some of the burnout and staffing shortages. I'd love to hear, I guess, are there any additional use cases specific for medical practices that you've seen that are really interesting on other ways to integrate AI into to healthcare?
Well, one thing I do know is that there currently, AI is being used to assist physicians in reviewing patient information to improve efficiency. So, just going in there and kind of reviewing the information and making sure it's all in there. It is structured, because right now the EMRs still remain fairly unstructured. There's a quote, a notes section, and that's where physicians can go in there and free form, the information. So as they try to, more and more structure the data, that's where, AI is playing a part in, are all the data points there that I need to make this a useful diagnosis for the patient.
That's interesting. And I would also, so one of the things that we see often, a use case. So, we're talking about all kinds of AI in this discussion here. We're talking about supervised learning AI, and where you have data that you've defined, this is what cancer looks like, in an MRI or whatever, and you can be able to say, okay, well, does this picture contain cancer? Labeled supervised AI. But we're also talking about this generative AI, where this notes field is a great example, and we've seen with other organizations take this content and extract the important information from it, and then be able to create it in a machine readable format. So I think that's a great use case, but this is where you can't just copy and paste that into ChatGPT,
right,
and run with it. And so what are you seeing out there from a when people are looking at what problems to solve? Where are some of the problems coming up? So I know in our pre-show discussion, we chatted about some of these.
Yeah. So, we definitely have a shortage, and this is, again, one example, a shortage of trained radiologists around the globe. I mean, again, staffing shortages and physician burnout's a huge problem. So AI is now being used to improve diagnostics from an accuracy and a time perspective. So what these models are doing is, interpreting chest x-rays, detecting cancer in mammograms, identifying brain tumors in MRIs, or predicting the development of Alzheimer's disease in PET scans. But at the end of the day, what this means for the patients is that they are being diagnosed faster and more accurately, and then they can begin their treatment sooner. And that's huge. There was an article from the researchers at Stanford Academic Medical Center, and they developed their own deep learning algorithm to aid in the interpretation of chest x-rays. And their algorithm was able to detect, 14 different types of pathologies for 10 diseases. But regarding the efficiency, it took the radiologists an average of 4 hours or 240 minutes to label 420 images. But the algorithm labeled these in 1.5 minutes. So again, just you think of them as kind of their helper. If they can get through 420 images, you're getting that many more people, into the system and getting treated sooner. So this kind of demonstrates the power and efficiency that AI solutions in the medical imaging field, and highlights how, AI solutions can reduce errors related to human fatigue and improve diagnostics.
Very interesting. Yeah, this going back to Microsoft's terminology of Copilot.
Yes.
I love I feel like, man, you guys nailed that with the from the marketing term. And it's your assistant. And I remember reading studies that I can't cite off the top of my head, but it was a study about when the doctor and the AI worked together, there was even a higher accuracy rating, like that it was both of them had their accuracy ratings, but the best accuracy was when the doctor and the AI worked together to be able to really nail it down. So very fascinating stuff.
Totally agree.
What are some of the resistances that you see in the healthcare industry to AI, and some of the challenges that people are like, yeah, no, that's not for us?
That's a good question. I just think it's for me personally, I think it's sort of this lack of confidence. Like, I think even though the AI will say, here's the problem and here's what you need to look at, I think the clinicians are still going back and going, well, let me double check that. If it's not a proven methodology out there. Other things I know that we've been running into, I've been hearing about, is sort of, this data bias, because mostly these models are trained using data from academic medical centers. So that doesn't represent all the types of populations that are out there. So it can be very discriminating, the data, when you're trying to treat someone. And one of the examples I came across was creating a model based on knowing the symptoms of a heart attack. So they built a model that says if you have these symptoms, you're having a heart attack. Well, what they didn't know is that symptoms in men and women are very, very different. So this model was, helping the men population with identifying, hey, they have symptoms for heart attack. So, let's triage them in this particular sense. But then when the woman would present, since they have different systems, they were not getting triaged appropriately and were not getting the care.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm sorry, Tally?
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, no. So I think, we're always basing these AI models on and testing them out with data that's already been collected. But then we have to look at what's the data that's been collected. Is it garbage in, garbage out?
Mm-hmm.
Has it been from academic medical centers? Is it, an affluent population versus, other types? So that whole social determinants of health starts to weave its way into all of that data that you're looking at to create an AI model.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. And obviously skewed data or, slight inaccuracies in different models, we've seen across the board, across many different industries, but obviously the implications within healthcare are literally life or death in a lot of situations. I know on the previous episode, one of the ones I talked about was an AI model used to find these biases in different medical papers and research resources around dermatology, and the photos we use to diagnose and learn about different skin care or skin cancer or skin ailments, and a lot of those were shown on lighter skin tones. And so that created a lot of misdiagnoses on folks with darker skin tones, which obviously can lead to really serious health implications later on. So making sure we're being aware of that and being even more strategic with the types of data and the clean data that we're using as the data sets for these tools when it comes to healthcare, I think is only more important.
Right. I agree 100%.
And Tim, I know you posted not too long ago a really interesting article on healthcare providers using AI when it comes to patient care and
yes,
empathy. I'd love to hear that example. I think that's a really great use case.
Yeah. So, and this is a great use case across industries. Is the doctor used ChatGPT to formulate how to explain the medical condition without any patient information. Obviously, they kept it all safe, but he formulated, how do I explain this to a non-doctor? Because a lot of time in industry and in all industries, and I see this in myself all the time. I'm talking to people about AI, and I'm talking about it like I think about it, and they're like, "I have no idea what you're saying." And so, using ChatGPT to formulate, how do I explain this diagnosis? How do I explain this condition to a patient who is non-medical, non-technical, so that they understand it? And that is a really great way to kind of meet people where they're at. And I said, not just for healthcare, you could use that for any technical exercise and activity, whether it's software development or, fixing a car or, whatever. How do I explain this to people who are not deep in the knowledge of this domain? Very good use case.
Right. So, Tim, that's so interesting. I had a friend, and she went to the thing. Anyway, some visit, got a huge diagnosis, did not understand it. And then she put it into ChatGPT and says, what does this mean for me? So it's almost the reverse. This was the patient using it to say, I don't understand what my physician's trying to tell me. So what is it? And it, took it in, took all the scientific terms and just, put it in language that she would understand.
That's interesting. I wonder, as we're kind of talking through this as an example, for those who've been following all the drama around AI assistants, and Meta having these AI assistants that they're building, and all these the tech companies racing to build AI assistants, Copilot being one is a good example. If we'll be seeing medical assistants that work in this translation capability, that are joining the conversation with the provider and the patient. It's the AI in the room that says, okay, now I'm going to explain to you what the doctor just said in ways that you can understand and take action on. Because again, this is all important stuff. But again, we get into, as Tally brought up, the data bias and the data storage. Like, who owns that information? And how do you maintain your privacy and your medical, identity and privacy with that information? These are big challenges as we go forward. So, real quick, I do want to just say, for those who have questions, please throw them into the comments for the event. We'd love to hear from you. We have never had the invite somebody on stage to ask a question, but if somebody would like to try to be the first one to do that, you can use the React. Actually, there's a way to raise your hand, but I'm not sure how. So just post in the comments, and we'll try to invite you on stage and see what we can do here. But if you have questions, let us know. All right.
But I think the question around data security is really important as well. And I know, Tim, one solution we've seen is kind of internal company-based chat bots. So instead of using a public, a ChatGPT or Microsoft Bing chat, implementing, there's ways to implement internal chat solutions, which I think is a great application, not only for healthcare, but for a variety of industries.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What's interesting that I just came across is, over in Europe with the GDPR, they have now, I don't know if passed the legislation or whatever, but if your personal data, even though it might be anonymized, is going to be used in an AI tool to, predict or do whatever else, they have to notify you, and you have the ability to opt out. Now, how they're going to roll that out and how they're going to do that and check that, it seems like an enormous problem in and of itself. But what they're saying is, hey, it's your data, you own it. And if you don't want it to be used to try to, train an AI model, then you don't have to.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lisa. And man, good luck with that one. Because once you've trained a model, it's really hard. Unless you do a full retraining with the removed data, it's not easy to just pluck data out of it. So I think the biggest challenge that we're going to see in some of these enforcements are going to be Well, how, you have to retrain your model again. And, GPT-4 is a great example, trained up until what it was 2022, sometime in 2022. And why don't they train it all the time? Well, because it's a big effort to do the training. And so if you have to retrain when people want their data removed, I think that's going to lead to new monetization models of if you approve us to use your data, you get one price tag. And if we have to babysit your data, you get a different price tag for the service, or the service isn't even available to you. I think that could be I could see that panning out in the future. And of course, in healthcare, now that's a really big challenge. The right to be forgotten, and the right to say, turn off the AI when I walk in the room. So interesting. Well, what other problems can we solve today, Lisa? We're solving them all.
We're solving all these problems.
Burnout, I think, is a really important one for us to come back to. And that makes me think of Microsoft released a chatbot a while back called the health, I think it was HealthBot or something like that. It was a chatbot pre-built for healthcare scenarios and situations. But one of the use cases where the conversation flows that was implemented was a mental health check-in for nurses and doctors. That it would go in and basically do a mental health screening for the nurses and doctors while on shift. Just check in and see how they're doing, and then provide them the resources. So I think this is and that's across industry. Again, we're talking about healthcare, but every industry has challenges finding great talent. Every industry is having challenges retaining that talent. Every industry has talent issues. So from a chatbot perspective, Lisa, have you encountered things like that out in the wild, or is that kind of oh, that's nice, but nobody's going to use that? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, we definitely are. I mean, one of the biggest issues for physicians as well is, their work basket or their in basket. It's a sort of an epic term, but, they get all these questions and prescription refills and all of this stuff dumped in their in basket, which takes them well into the night just to even react. And some of these can be, what are the directions to the hospital, all this stuff. So I know we're looking at a lot of AI models that, can kind of read that information and then respond to it. And I think for me, that's kind of where AI needs to even go the step further is once we've decided, okay, this person only wants directions, but then the next flow has to be another piece of AI or something that gives them the directions. So I think right now that's kind of where it's stopping. So it's hey, this can predict something, but then what are we going to do after we predict it? Who are we going to notify? How are they going to notify them? What type of people need to be involved? Who are the stakeholders in this AI solution? So, but again, there are lots of ways to, I think, alleviate a lot of these manual repetitive tasks for physicians. And I think they also, with all the clinical data, there's just more and more being generated every day. We can get closer to precision medicine, where you live, what your genetics are, what your lifestyle is. But we're going to need help synthesizing all that data and coming out with how should we treat this person. So it's kind of a 2-lane highway at this point that needs to merge.
Yeah. And what do you think why aren't we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Or why are we there yet?
For all the things that we've just been talking about. So data, the data biases, can you even use my data? All of that. And then the data we keep generating more and more and more clinical data. And then is it the correct data? So are we getting the right data points? And do we have the historical data to support it, in the heart attack symptoms examples. So I think it's just a lot of refining. So I think it's really like 20 years out there, but that's just me throwing a dart out there. But, it just.
So the biggest roadblock that you're seeing is really just, this is all new, and we just got to navigate through it. Which is good to hear, because when you have active resistance of like, this is not what we're doing, and I'm sure there is some degree of that, of like, this isn't how I learned how to do medicine, so that's not what we're doing, again, because I see that across every industry. That's not how we've always done it, and so people, not everybody's on board with change,
right?
But
fear of the unknown.
Yeah, and as well as like, and we're talking about people's lives, literally. It's different if it's like, oh, well, do you want to write those lines of code with ChatGPT? You want to try that out? Like, nobody's going to die, if it doesn't work. But that could be the case here. Tally, what are your thoughts here?
I agree with that. And I think also recognizing there's ways to maybe start gaining trust in these tools before implementing them in a life or death situation, I think might be the best approach for that. I know, hospitals have different departments, maybe integrating it in their billing department first and making sure it's trustworthy and reliable, and then running tests and using it in different departments, just so people can start to, see AI as a beneficial tool and colleague, so to speak. But I think that is a mindset shift that needs to happen, as I mentioned, over time.
So, Tim, I have a question for you. So I would think in the payer world, that AI is much more accepted or widely used. Is that a correct statement, or am I off base?
So across all boards, AI is, everybody is very curious and interested in artificial intelligence. Not a lot of people are investing in it. That's statistics from Ernst & Young, Deloitte, and Accenture all really hit on those topics. So everybody's really interested in it. And it comes back to how you define AI. If you look at like tools like robotic process automation as forms of artificial intelligence, then there is a lot of activity in payer for claims processing, claims management, especially hospital systems to speed up claim time and speed the revenue. So there is a higher adoption of those type of tools, right, where a lot of AI in industry breaks down is what Tally and I refer to as digital confidence, like people even understanding what is it and what can I do with it, as well as having the confidence of like, yes, we can use this and I don't have to be afraid of it. That's one major roadblock we see in a lot of businesses. The second is, and do I have this team with the skills to work with this? And that's another area where, it has been a disservice that the narrative around AI is it's extremely technically complicated, and you have to have a data science master's degree to be able to work with it. That's just not the case. There are so many tools that can bring AI to you that you don't need to have a deep data science knowledge, but you do need to have a deep domain business knowledge. So you need to know your claim system. You need to know what claims are processed how and from a payer perspective. So this is where we see two roadblocks, the confidence and the skill set. And then from there, AI has huge use cases to help with these things as a co-pilot. Right. And that's the other key thing. So
right. I do know in healthcare where we tend to always start, and it's because, like you say, we don't want to affect patients' lives. So we start in all those shared services, the billing department, the HR department, finance and accounting, supply chain. That's where we're doing all the, implementing and testing and first start where the tools. Rarely do you go, well, let's just get right into the operating room and put a robot in there. But yeah, I agree with you.
And so for those shared services, any kind of repetitive processing task, that's a prime candidate to get AI involved to help out the team. Any kind of summarization task, that's another area where AI can really help. Summarization and analysis of data. And so specifically generative AI. And so we've seen use cases of, take this blob of text and format it into a machine readable format. I mentioned this a little earlier. That's a great use case for generative AI. And so what we did to go a little bit more technical is we had this CSV, comma separated data, and we were using generative AI to reformat it into a whole different data format, into JSON data format. And we could have done that manually, but it takes forever. So when we think about like EDI files and the old data transfer systems, this could be a really transformative technology for some of those old processes. So good stuff. All right. Do you guys want to talk about wins? You want to transition to the wins? Lisa, you had a win. What's your win?
Excuse me. So yeah, I saw an article yesterday, and I knew I was coming on this, podcast to talk with you guys. And the title of the article was AI Model Combines Imaging and Patient Data to Improve Chest X-ray Diagnosis. So really the key takeaways in that article were that they now have an AI model that combines the imaging. So we had talked about that earlier, like scanning the images and reading them for, Alzheimer's and whatnot. But now they can add in the clinical patient data to enhance the accuracy. So again, and I don't know, they don't go into any description on what that clinical patient data is. I'm assuming probably basics, age, gender, all of those things for the diagnosis performance for chest x-rays. So currently, AI-based approaches are typically specialized to handle either the imaging or the non-imaging data separately, but this new model can integrate both types of data for a more precise diagnosis.
Very cool. Multimodal. That's the term du jour for the
Is it?
World of AI. Yep.
They mentioned transformer-based neural networks. That got a little over my head, but
yeah. So yeah, transformer. So for those not familiar, transformer-based neural networks is a really different approach than traditional neural networks. Very, very cool stuff beyond the scope of this call, but you can dig into it. Maybe we'll share a little write-up I have about transformers so you can get a good grip. They were that's what made GPT, the T at the end of GPT is transformers. That's what made GPT so useful and powerful. So big deal, those transformers. They're more than meets the eye. For those who get the 80s reference, I know Ed Mullen, I saw you on the call. So, all right. Cool. Awesome win. Tally, what do you got?
Very cool. So ironically, I feel like this word has come up a few times throughout our talk today, co-pilot, and really using AI as the analogy we're using is a co-pilot. But in this article I found, it's a literal co-pilot. So an MIT News article that came out this week titled AI Co-Pilot Enhances Human Precision for Safer Aviation. So it's designed to ensure safer skies. And this tool blends human intuition with machine precision, creating a symbiotic relationship between pilot and aircraft. So this was intriguing to me. I used to have a fear of flying, which thankfully I don't anymore, but this is great to hear that we can have even safer airways. So MIT researchers developed a system called Air Guardian, and it tracks pilot eyes. So essentially, this attention tracking tool has the potential for allowing earlier interventions and greater predictability for human pilots. So it's really interesting to see, one, it's a great analogy that, we're using AI as co-pilots here, but literally making sure we're leveraging AI for safer air travel, which I think was just a really interesting example. It's not in use yet. It's still in its pilot, no pun intended, pilot phase. But yeah, I just thought this was a really interesting article and really interesting use case of how we can use eye tracking capabilities to assist workers in, especially pilots, in paying attention to the things that they need to pay attention to. So I thought that was really cool.
That is really cool. And that's, we're talking about problems that have been around for a while, or technologies that have been around for a while. And we talk all the energy around AI right now. AI has been around since the 1800s, and, people talking about artificial intelligence and the thinking machine. But the eye tracking, as you're mentioning, it reminded me of a project, and maybe because it was just on, I think dropped off, but we were using eye tracking for joint attention for autistic children to be able to track eye contact with cartoon characters on the screen. And it was really cool project. And, hearing an evolution of that project in the piloting and the aircraft space, such a cool thing to hear. So
totally
awesome.
Very cool.
Awesome. Well, I don't know, on the topic of flying, my win this week is I've been listening to Making It So by Patrick Stewart. For those who are familiar with Sir Patrick Stewart, also known as Jean-Luc Picard, very famous actor. It has been a wonderful book. I'm listening to the audiobook. He is the narrator of it. And it is just he's just telling you about his life, and it jumps around, and he gets to this story about this haunted painting. It is such a fun listen. There are some tough parts. So some parts where he had some challenges growing up, and kind of hearing them, it's ooh, that's not easy to hear, but really great book, and I'd highly recommend it to anybody. So that's my win.
Great.
Awesome. Lisa, thank you for joining us today and talking about healthcare and AI. And we really appreciate your insights. This has been really a great conversation. Thank you.
No, thank you guys. It was really fun. So anytime.
Awesome. Well, Tally and I will be back in a few weeks here. Tally is going off on some awesome vacation time. So we'll be back with you guys after that. Stay tuned to LinkedIn. We've got some really, really great announcements coming in the next 2 weeks. So keep an eye on Mind Over Machines and what we're doing in the AI space. I'm very excited to share what we've been cooking in the next few weeks here. So can't say any more, but stay tuned. Good stuff coming. Awesome. All right, Tally, anything else?
No, keep an eye on the comments. I will link all of the news and win links that we talked about today. And in the meantime, if there's any more questions or topics that you guys want to hear about, definitely leave comments on the page, and we'll be sure to address that in the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Have a great day.
See you guys.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.